May, how many people are supposed to show up at the draft tonight?
4.
Four. How I already text Christian. Stu's, I don't know where the hell he's at, somewhere at Sunset Beach, just hanging out, probably drinking a Mai Tai. He said he could probably make it out, but that is an odd number. Are we going to be able to draft your cube tonight, the fake cube? Can it do four?
Well, I think it's possible. Anything's possible with a cube, baby! That's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah. Welcome to Uber Cube, the podcast we discuss all things cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka Uber Bear, and today I am joined by the lovely May. Say hello once again, please, May.
Hi, I'm May. I'm allergic to compliments.
Yeah, I too am allergic. So we wanted to do something. This was a listener request from the Facebook MTG drafting page where they reached out to me and said, hey, we love your show. I would love it if you could help us out with the thing that we're dealing with, as if the whole cube world's not dealing with this. Odd numbers while drafting your cube. You know that instance, May, where you've got a cube that's designed to handle 8 players, but 7 show up. Or you've got a cube that's designed to handle 8 players and 11 show up. This thing always happens. Or you get 3, or all these numbers. And like, what are you supposed to do in these scenarios? So I thought maybe we had an episode here, something we could talk about, like how, I guess, to divvy up the wealth, make sure everybody gets their cube action, and that you can still enjoy your cube at home, but with an odd bunch of players. Not odd as in as in Anthony odd, but as in a prime number or something strange, where we're trying to get people to play a little bit more cube.
I suppose you could say that we can't even with these numbers. I'll see myself out.
So let's kind of just cut right in this. We're going to save a lot of time here. But first, we're going to open up with, hey, May, what are you drinking?
So I am drinking a sour from Adventurous Brewing. It is Please This Pie Boysenberry.
It is. That sounds amazing, actually. And I'm having a Bell's Two-Hearted IPA. Let's go ahead and crack them open, and we'll just get right into this topic. All right, so drafting with odd numbers, that little weird thing where, you had the best intentions of having your total, your 8-pod cube or your 4-pod cube or whatever number you've decided to design your entire cube around, that perfect number, and then to fall short of that or to get too many people. And how do you navigate that in this scenario? And some of this might come off as common sense, but some of it might, be, it might help someone out. That's what May and I were talking about before we got started. So let's just crack right into it.
So I think an important thing to note is that when it comes to something like, say, a bar cube or a travel cube, things that we actively talked about before, like these are cubes that are designed to be smaller in scale. Like these are cubes that are designed to be like less than 8 people type cubing experience. And it's a different thing when you're trying to turn a cube that's meant for 8 people into an experience for 4 or less, or somewhere like 6 on these weird numbers, right?
I'd even go so far as to say we could go on the other tilt here and say you've got a cube designed for a 4, a 180 bar cube. Then Anthony walks up and says, hey, are you guys cubing? I'd like to join you. And now I make your 5th, and it's kind of a want. How do we deal with these different scenarios? So we're going to talk about that. So without further ado, we're just going to cut into we're going to kind of build this up. We're going to start with let's go 1v1. Let's start with that as an idea. It's just me versus May right now. And what size cube you want to do, May? You want to do a 180, 360, 540? What are you feeling?
I tend to have my favorite 1v1 cube experiences with travel cubes, obviously, because, they're just more compact. You're going to see more of the cube. But if I'm trying to make it work, then it's going to be somewhere around 360 or less, typically. I've done a few cubes with, like, my girlfriend Cade, for example, where we've done like bigger cubes where 540 up, and they're interesting experiences when it leans into the kind of random nature of it, but trying to navigate it comes down to more of the environment that I'm wanting to play and not necessarily the card pool at that point.
Yeah,
So
I agree with that. And as we kind of break into this, there is a certain amount of, I guess you have to kind of adjust your expectations, right?
yeah.
So whenever I travel to Georgia to see my little brother, I always take cubes with me. That's my mom and them always kind of expect that my Josh and I are going to go break off and find a dining room table, and we're going to go crack some cube. And we're going to do some 1v1 stuff. And I'll take my 540 powered vintage cube. I will take my 360 Uber Bears artifact cube. I will take my 185 Dragons Walk into a Bar. The only one I won't take action will come up to this will be like, say, for example, my Desert cube or my two-headed giant cube. And we're going to break into those reasons as we progress here. But when Josh and I sit down at the table, we have a couple of favorites that we do. And as I talk about this, there's going to be a lot more variety and a lot more opportunity in the 1v1, or we're even going to say, where was 3-player type of adjustments to some of these ideas, sometimes 4. But I would say even in our group, Chris and I, after work, sometimes I'll meet up and we'll draft a 360 cube using some of these formats. And we have a certain amount of variety that we do. So I'm going to kind of go through the odds and ends of this conversation, and we're going to kind of pro and con it as we break it down. So the first one, this is one that I do quite regularly when we want to, and it's going to be a Winston draft. So the way a Winston draft is going to work is typically it's 90 cards. I mean, you can adjust this to taste, to quote Usman, but we do 90 cards, which is a very small amount of pool from, say, a 540. A little bit better than a 360, probably a lot better hit in the 180s, right? That's where the travel cube idea kind of plays a little better into this, or as you call them, two-berts or 180 cubes. But if you got a larger cube and you just want to play and you want to adjust that, as I said, you have to adjust your expectations. So Winston draft, yet what you do is we typically, Chris and I will sit across from one another, and I'll take 45 cards for no reason, and he'll take 45 cards sampling out of, say, a 360 cube or a 540, whatever we're doing, and we'll just shuffle them up after we get a 90 card count. And then we'll stack them over typically to the left, and then we'll lay out 1, 2, 3 singular card piles. And the way we'll do is we'll go ahead and roll out. See who goes first. And then what you do is you look at the card. Typically, in my case, I'm just doing this for, I guess, my own understanding or with spatial recognition. I'll grab the card furthest to the right. I'll look it over privately, see if I like this card. Let's say it's Ragavan. Maybe I don't like Ragavan. That's a bad example. So I'm going to put Ragavan back down. And then I'll take a card off the top of that remaining of the 87 cards, I guess, that are remaining in that scenario, and put it back on top of that placeholder number 1, or we'll call it the A pile. And then I'll migrate over to the second pile. And then I'll look at the card or cards and decide if those are keep or not. And that you kind of keep doing this as you're always taking a card or taking a clump of cards and then replacing it from the top of the deck of the once 90 cards that you started with. That's kind of the gist of the format. Have you ever tried that before, May?
I have not ever done a Winston draft before. At least I don't think I have. I might be misremembering.
So I guess if we're going to talk about, as we mentioned, it's pretty straightforward. You make 3 piles, A, B, C, and you take from the 90 and you keep filling them up and just draft that way. So the pros are, and I always like to think about the pros. The reason why we do this so frequently, quite frankly, it's fast. It's the fast way of draft. Mm-hmm. But then the cons, I'm going to put less focused, but I'm also going to say the decks can be a little soupy, kind of running at 3-4 colors. You're not really going to complete your subset, say, in a synergy-based cube. You might get kiki-jiki, but you don't get anything to complete with because you're only sampling 90 cards out of, say, my Power Vintage cube of 540. Again, that's the resetting of your expectations. You're here just to play some Magic. You want to jam some pretty quick. And the tighter your cube list is, the better the performance of this draft it will be. Back to the 180 is the prime number almost.
So if I can hijack your point about this a little bit, I think that when we are talking about trying to adjust our packs for the player numbers, it's better to first address what the actual problems are so that way we can address what the solutions are. So our first problem is that when we are sitting down and playing cubes that aren't designed for like lower number environments, you aren't going to see as much of the cube because the cube's not designed for those densities, right? And when you're looking at, say, 360 up or even 270 up in some cases, where this is a situation that is created because you have a limited amount of players, And if you're trying to take the standard 3 packs of 15, you're only going to see 45 of those cards for yourself, right? And then you times that.
Plus or minus, yeah.
Yeah, plus or minus. So point is that with a default amount, if it's a 360 cube with 8 players, you're going to see all of those cards. However, as the numbers decrease, the less cards you're going to see of your cube. So the reason that I am trying to put an emphasis on this is because one of the problems that we're trying to solve is increasing the amount of cards that you see. And Winston Draft is one of the ways that you can kind of address that. Another way that I tend to like doing a 2-player draft is called Pancake. And it's where you have 9 packs of 11. And it is where you pack 1, pick 1. Then you pack 2, pick 2, burn 2. Then you pack 2, pick 2, burn 2. So you should end up with 5 cards out of every pack, right?
Right. What cube you choose to do this with does also impact the experience. An example being is Pancake or Winston that we just did. In my opinion, if I play, say, Sandwich's Popper Cube, it's a lot more forgiving. Or Sandwich's Peasant Cube, also equally forgiving. As in, I believe Sandwich has mentioned this, Chris has mentioned this a few times. Even in the Peasant, you start getting a little bit more signpost-driven cards, but the Popper's even more forgiving because the cards can be this mashup. The land density, your non-basics don't matter as much to your deck performance, these type things. So these type cubes are a lot more forgiving if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for an optimal play experience, neither of these are what you're looking for. If you're looking to jam some magic, get some reps in, go to another game, do it again, and be willing to look at stuff kind of on a speed-based scenario, this is a better outcome for me. That's why sometimes we know, we've got 35, 45 minutes before people are showing up for the full pod draft, right? On our Thursday nights, and this is where Sandwich and I'll sit around and just kind of knock out some quick little games. So it has its purposes. It's a
speed is 100% a problem that should be into consideration. And when you are trying to play something quickly, Winston Draft is really good for that because you just move through cards quicker than having to look through each pack. And as much as I enjoy something like Pancake, because again, it lets us just see through more cards, it gives that kind of draft experience with like a little burn aspect as well. So it's like, oh, I'm keeping track of like what my opponents are taking too. Even though like with grid drafting, pancake drafting, whatnot, there is a speed concern that you've alluded to. And it's why I wanted to put an emphasis on when you're trying to figure out the best solution for you, figure out what your problem is.
Yeah, so it's kind of a zero-sum game anyways, right? We're killing time. But I will say there's a bit of a sunk cost in regards to time once you're done with this air quotes speed draft of these. Your deck building process may take a little longer if your goal is to win, which, I mean, we're playing for fun, Chris and I. But, sometimes assembling your deck with this mishmash of nonsense, and maybe you don't have any non-basics to complete the set, but you're forced to splash this color, right? That is kind of the cost of this, but it's just a speed game. It's kind of like what you do almost borderline in between like matches at an RCQ or something like that, where you're wanting to kill time and you've got 45 minutes to kill, and this is what we're going to do. So let's kind of move over to one that I think we've switched over to a little bit more. And this is where we're going to get into the odd numbers. And I'm going to give you a breakdown for this one for 2 and 3 players. This was not a format it was grid drafting that I was overly familiar with. As a matter of fact, I can tell you I was completely doing it wrong up until the last CubeCon. I was corrected by the gang because they saw me grid drafting incorrectly. So Chris sat down with me and showed me how the proper way to grid draft. And so the way that we approach a grid draft is a little different than the Winston, where the Winston are unknown cards and May's peeking at them and taking little hidden piles and kind of deck building on a undisclosed information to you as the opponent. Grid drafting is going to have a different layer of skill. It's going to be open face. And because these cards are turned upright, you're going to have a few other problems. You may have a little bit more hate drafting in the middle of this. You may have an opportunity on the positive end to learn why May is picking this card, because you can see that her deck is assembling in a smart way, and I'm over just picking these random lines. So the way a grid drafting will work is we've been doing this, and if we're wrong, internet check us, but this is how we're doing it in our homegrown situation. We get out a D20 and we set it to 18. And if we're doing a 2-player grid draft, we will do 3x3 setup. So what we've done is we've just taken basically like a whole cube. We don't even worry about it. It's already shuffled. And we'll flip over 9 cards, 3x3. And we'll roll the dice who goes first, and whoever goes first gets the first pick. Now they're going to choose either a row or a column. So say May sees, 2 non-basics and Ragavan, scoops them up. I'm left with the B and C columns looking down. I now have a choice. I can either go horizontal or vertical on my selection. Once I've done that, that pack is done. Move over to the next one, flop over another 9. And that's where we're rolling the D20 to see where we stand. Have you ever done this before, May?
No. I have not done, especially not with the dice. I have not done anything regarding dice. Like, I've done something that's adjacent to grid drafting before, but I have not done that one before. I will have to have it on my to-go list for when I go to CubeCon this year.
It's fun and it's fast. Because it's open-faced information, though, certain strategies will suffer if you're actually, playing to win. Again, this for us, this is another speed round. This is the bonus magic that we're doing before people show up. So we're not really paying a lot of attention. You're not cutting cards and we're not hate drafting in that. But if you were playing this for reals, and May was my opponent, and she could see that I'm going heavy into green and she doesn't want me to get a green threat, we'll say prime time, she could cut that line and take that card out of the mix so I don't have access to it. That is kind of a flaw or a bug to this idea. And the same thing might be true for aggro players might suffer because someone's cutting them off of all the cards that give them aggro by building their mid-range on their rows and columns. So
I actually think it's kind of a feature. It adds a new dynamic when you're drafting like with less people and it's open face. When you're aware of like what people have access to throughout the draft, it's a lot more engaging, it's a lot more personal, and it's kind of my minor complaint when it comes to like drafting as a format is just a lot of times that we have these packs that we pick up, we look at them and then we're just like all these interesting cards I'd love to talk about, but I cannot because everybody's trying to concentrate, do their own thing, and more importantly, you're not supposed to give anybody information, right? But when it's open face, you're now actually having to engage with your opponents, and cutting your opponents off from certain archetypes that would counter you is kind of the fun part of that draft style. So some people might actually find that to be an upside.
This is where it gets spicy. So the 1v1 version is basically when the column or the row has disappeared, this is what you have left to choose from. Now insert the wild card. You can do a 3-player version of this. And this is now where I think the stakes get a little higher, because in the 1v1, as you mentioned, this is just how we play. Chris and I are killing time, and it's pretty open-faced. We're not really trying to cut each other. But when you mix in 3 people, it suddenly gets this whole new dynamic that begins to happen in the game. So the way you're going to do a grid draft with 3 people, it's still the 9x9. It's still the roll over the 18, as we talked about. We're using 18 to count 18 turns or 18 packs that have been cracked open. But instead, what we'll do now is whenever the first player chooses their row or their column, then once that's taken out of the 9, then you replace that for the second player to now have a new 3 to look at of that or whatever's remaining, right? And then the third player does not get a replacement. They normally have just either 2 rows or 2 columns. So they just kind of get the residuals. And then you rotate who picks first as you go around the horn. And it creates this whole, we just actually did this past Thursday, and Chris is so cool and calm, and he's sitting there making his picks. And then if you look at me, I'm over there cussing Christian because he's constantly cutting me. Like I'm trying to build, he's like, I wasn't going to take it till you said something. That's how our dynamic is. I'm like, hey man, whatever you do, don't touch that card. And he's like, well, you shouldn't have said that. He'll scoop up that whole pile. And it's ruthless amongst friends. But it is a fun way of playing. We've actually enjoyed that a little bit more because we seem to get our trickle-in type people as we're getting our 8. We'll sometimes have 2 come in. We might fire 2 cubes this way. Or if we're in the middle of 1v1, another person will fire up. But you have to kind of mod this. So as we kind of talk about these different amount of humans that are in the room drafting, you can stack these like Legos until you have your full party, for lack of better terms. When all 8 people show up, you guys can scoop it up and then do the real cube that you wanted to do. But until then, say May and I are right now grid drafting, and then Chris and Christian walked in and they might want to go ahead and take another cube or take the remaining piece of the cube and do a Winston draft from it while we're all waiting. So you can kind of piecemeal this, is what's neat about it. And we do that in our group all the time.
So to move along, I think that after having a few, let's say, informationally dense drafting styles, we could just mention a quick and easy thing that you can do to make it so that we can see more cards, and that is increase the amount of packs, but decrease the amount of cards per pack. So, for example, there are often times where I don't have a complete pod for the Fake Cube. So one of the things that we do is that instead of doing 3 packs of 15, instead we'll do like 4 packs of 13, right? Where we'll just cut a couple cards and then increase the packs by 1. It makes it so that way we get to see more cards, we get access to more things to build your decks, and it can be a good workaround for that. And when we're engaging with a lot of this conversation, it is under the mindset that there are lots of ways to interact with your cube beyond just you have to have 8 players. And this is a conversation that I've had with my group a lot.
It's real. It's
recently.
real, yeah.
Because they're convinced that it's just like, well, it's not a real cube experience unless you have 8 people. And it's just like, no, you can have as many people as you want to play cube. So it's just a matter of adjusting how you're doing it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. One of the things you mentioned before was about doing the pack adjustment. So even like the traditional 315 that gives you 3 pack 1 pick ones out of your draft, and some of the cards, you'll notice cards just kind of circulating around, and you hear people go, woohoo, I can't believe this wheeled back to me and all that. That's all fun, right? Mm-hmm. But imagine if you had, say, 9 pack 1 pick ones, or because you had, you see where I'm going with this? Because maybe you did, or let's kind of reframe that. And let's say, imagine if you had 5 pack 1 pick ones because you did 5 packs of 9. And now you've increased the pack 1 pick ones, which takes away the table information and allows you to latch into more, I guess, constructed synergies within a cube environment that may have been a little disabled by the fact that you're playing a lesser amount of humans, but now you can be more choice on your individual pack 1 pick ones that allow your deck to be more synergy driven or more focused. You can kind of just, again, to quote Usman, you can adjust that to taste. The numbers can be played with based around the amount of people you have. Just the pack numbers to make the densities better, to increase the performance of the deck so you don't feel like you're playing with less people. Does that make sense in a nutshell?
Right. So moving on, I think that you should clue me in on a bit of how glimpse drafting works, because you have it listed in the show notes, but I've actually never heard of glimpse drafting before.
This was another one of those 1v1 scenarios, and I'm going to screw this up, so I'm going to call this a glimpse draft. This was originally made by White Wolf, and it's been modded since, and we play, if things come out into the wild, everybody adjusts things to their own taste and how we do it, but the way we would do it in a 1v1, say again, going back to Thanksgiving, and we're waiting for the turkey to come out of the oven, and my little brother Josh and I want to get some drafts in. 9 packs 15, you take 1, and then you burn 2. So 2 go into the burn pile, and then you pass the pack, and you keep going back and forth, and you're basically eroding it. You want to have more than 270 cards in order to pull this off, but what you can get is whenever you're doing this, take an individual card and then burning 2, you're emulating the idea as if the packs were going around the table and you had 8 players. You're kind of the bots in the game, if you will. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so you're simulating that way. We're not just passing the same packs back and forth, just building the best decks. Might as well be, sealed at that point or constructed. Instead, you're saying, well, I don't want to pass Ragavan and I don't want to pass the Mox Opal to May, so I'm going to go ahead and burn those 2 because I'm not using those in my deck that I'm building. And then I'll pass you, and then you take yours, you burn 2, pass 2. It goes back and forth. So it's really fun. It's just a good little way of kind of building a more synergy-focused. It takes longer, but you can build a better deck this way, opposed to a Winston draft or a grid draft or a pancake draft. This takes more time because you're sitting there going through all these packs and passing them around and burning through it. But it gets more focused. That's kind of I guess I'll say that's the bonus of it. Sometimes you'll spend more time doing the draft than you will be playing the game, versus the Winston, you're going to spend less time on the draft and more playing the game. That's kind of what you're doing here.
So I definitely feel like that when we're talking about glimpse draft, it's in the complete opposite vein of, say, the Winston draft, where we're trying to like speed quickly going through like a bunch of cards. Glimpse draft takes a lot longer, but a lot more of the draft is the engaging process. So even though it's slower, it's more involved. And if you are somebody who enjoys the drafting process, this could be a great option for you.
Yeah, I agree with you. I guess that depends on, do you want to focus on the deck building or do you want to focus on the play? And what is the time constraints that you're working under? Or are there none at all?
Because a lot of this is coming that we're trying to come from the position of problem solvers. We're trying to figure out what is the problem that we're trying to solve with these different drafting styles in order to address what our players are needing, right?
Yep. The other day we were trying to draft Uber Bear's Artifact Cube. 8 people are supposed to show up. That's kind of what the focus of this episode is. Only 6 actually totaled out whenever we had 9 p.m. rolls around, and the people said they were coming, didn't show up. Well, let's go ahead and do a team draft. And a team draft is another way that you can take on a cube that's designed for 8 people and play it very comfortably at 6. And in the case of Uber Bear's Artifact Cube, I keep saying myself's name in there, but it's complex. It's very synergy driven. None of that, in my opinion, is being sacrificed by a team draft, because the way a team draft is going to work is you're going to draft your normal 3 packs of 15. You're going to basically figure out how your team members are in the beginning. What we do is we pass out forest and mountains and then flip them over, whatever team you're on. And then you kind of stagger from each other so you're not passing to your partner. And then the first team that wins the most matches, or a race to 5, wins the whole subset, the whole game. So we're just basically going through matches, pairing up. You could get more complex with it. You can do lowest to lowest and highest to highest and win rates. And we do that as we move around. But I think there's a certain point in the evening where we're not paying a great deal of attention to that. We're just tracking how many you've won and move forward. But it's a good way of taking something that was designed for 8 and making it work with 6. And then there's a lot of benefits to it. The benefits, in my opinion, from doing this, drafting my cube this way, is you get to learn that dynamic of the draft and how to read the table while trying to seed, say, May is 1 over for me, and I really need her to get this metal worker. I need to try to bait and switch to get Chris to take this other card so that she can get the metal worker. And I know it's colorless, not the best example. Or maybe I've read the room and I believe she's in Reanimator. I need to seed her over and get past Chris. So it teaches you these interesting, I guess, deck building techniques of reading the draft while you're doing it. And then another part that's really cool about it is once you're done with your draft, your team can get together and you can help deck build. And if you've got a really good player, like we have Thomas and we have our good friend Sam and we have others, they'll sit down with you and help you kind of, I guess, smooth out the rough edges of your deck construction. And the team can kind of talk about what their goal is in the matches. It's kind of fun.
So a minor advantage to team drafting as well is that when you have kind of a mixed pod where it's a mix of people who are experienced and people who aren't, you can actually like buddy people up with the experienced players with the inexperienced players in order to actually like help the inexperienced players like learn a little bit more of like that drafting process and learn a little bit more of that like signal reading and what's going on with the actual draft. And I feel like that's an underrated upside to it, because a lot of that is just kind of implied learning situations that new players are introduced to, and that's a strength that team drafting tends to have.
No, I'm going to give a little bit of a con to it, and this is just kind of my personal flavor or personal spin on this idea. There's a little bit of like an alpha player that can emerge, where maybe it's like when you play Two-Headed Giant, your partner might tell you what cards you need to play right now, May. Well, this can kind of happen when say one of your team members has already either, won their match or whatever. They'll have a habit because they want to help drive you to the win. They'll tell you how to play your cards. I've observed this in the wild on multiple occasions. And that's not a bad...
That's true, but I think that's more of a personal player interaction than a problem with the drafting style.
It is there because you've opened up the decision-making has been opened up to the team. It's a kangaroo court situation. So they see your lines. They'll tell you... And they can kind of tell you what you should be doing, even in your deck building part, where it can be a positive, but maybe they tell you, oh, no, you shouldn't run that card. You should run this card. So it has kind of a little bit of that dynamic of, say, a game like Pandemic, where, everybody's playing Pandemic. We're all trying to destroy all the viruses out here in the world. But one player always seems to find their way into that alpha spot to tell you where you should place your pieces on the game board. I'm not saying it's to that
Mhm.
extreme, but that is something that I have experienced with any of these cooperative type situations. Have you ever, like, Two at a
Use
Giant
with
felt that way?
caution.
Yeah, use with caution.
I think that if you have players that are good at, let's say, stepping back their ego a bit and letting people actually experience the game, then you can have a really good interaction in that way. And in other ways, then you'll have people kind of butting heads of trying to take that, let's call it the alpha spot. We'll put our alpha sigma male content online.
Where it gets more difficult is defining the others. If you've noticed, every time we've solved this outside of the one where he said you could do three, most of them were even numbers we're working with. And the only answer I could bring myself to say outside of doing like a star draft and all these weird things, because I just never really enjoyed these weird like Kingmaker type games or say like
Oh, Arc Enemy.
Arch Enemy or any of these types ways of playing. I haven't really done that too much, but I suppose you could do that in these weird numbers if you wanted
See,
to.
I love Arc Enemy, so that's an upside for me. But then again, Arc Enemy Cube would be already an extremely niche concept that I'd totally love to see.
So what do you do? You get
if
like
somebody's built this, you should
get
totally send it to
three
me.
players draft from a pauper or peasant cube, and one draft the Arc Enemy drafts from a vintage cube. That'd be fantastic. Come at me. So another one. Let's go to these kind of fives and sevens because we're gonna get away from these twos and fours and sixes and eights. But 5 and 7, I don't have any configurations for you. All we have is kind of, I guess, loose-ended advice. So consider single elimination for faster rotation. So say you've got 4 players and then another person walks in and they want to join the draft. You have options here. You could have the 4 people still do the draft, but the other player just rotates in to get to play in the games. We do that sometimes because there's no good way, in my opinion, to have 5 people draft or the 5 people draft and one decides to sit out and then do the single elimination and then they rotate in. There are options and configurations you can do with that. Another one that I believe
The way that I tend to do it is that I tend to say, I'm the curator, this is my cube, I'm going to be the one that'll sit out for the first round, so that way everybody gets a chance to play firsthand. And it also just gives me a chance to go around, see what people were building and what they were excited about while they're either like trying to deck build or trying to like get into their matches, and it's a lot more engaging for me as a curator, so I don't mind taking the first round off. And if you are the curator of your own environment, maybe that's an avenue that works for you.
I agree with that 100%. I actually think that is the best choice because you're right. I'll get to see people build things. Either I'm in the draft, but at least I'm getting to watch the matches and I'm getting to see interactions in my cube, and maybe someone will play a card in a way that I wasn't expecting. So there is a learning opportunity. I do firmly believe that the curator should always step out. Our group does that. Like, all right, it's my cube. I'm backing off. Now, the other thing you can do is do all the pack assortments, as we talked about. If you've got an odd number of players and you want to get more pack one, pick ones, do the math, figure out how many you need, and then just kind of adjust the number of cards in the pools up to your cube's capacity so you can either get more density of the cube or more pack one, pick ones, whatever suits you there. But these numbers can be tweaked just to make sure that, 3 packs of 15 doesn't always work. It just doesn't. Sometimes the math doesn't check out. You can tweak, and the decks will be fine. I mean, you don't have. Frankly, you can play Magic just fine without a sideboard. I know that would probably a lot of people might be going, I can't believe you said that, but it's a zero-sum game. We're just cubing. We're having a great time and enjoying time with our friends. I don't very often go to my sideboard. I might have 1 or 2 cards out of the remainders that I even use. I mean, how often?
So I think what it is that people are intimidated by like the prospect of the numbers and then trying to figure out what the ratios are, and doing math is scary, right? For a lot of people who aren't comfortable around numbers and not trying to figure out like the best way that they can get the most out of their environment, but are a little squeamish in terms of the actual like number crunching of, okay, but why are we doing these types of ratios? But that's the part they don't understand. When it comes to a lot of the actual process, it ultimately only makes a marginal difference. And it's important that we all recognize that Cube is innately a non-rigid format. There is nothing rigid about our format. Cube is very unpredictable. It has lots of different nuances and different ways that people can draft it and play it and whatnot, that we do not have to be married to the concept of 3 packs of 15, and it's okay to move on from that.
So let's talk about when all this, I love everything you said. I 100% agree with you. But let's talk about when this, in my opinion, from my experience, when this totally crashes and burns. Every modification just doesn't matter, because I have experienced this with several of my cubes. So as I say this, if you think I'm wrong, feel free to reach out to me and correct me. But I'm going to say desert cubes struggle with these adjusted numbers. Because when I built the Monopoly and I modeled it off of Dragons of Winter's Night by Chill MTG, the intent is that your lands are meant to be a struggle. These resources must be contested. Every time I've attempted to modify this so that, say, my little brother and I can play the Monopoly on Thanksgiving again, and we busted it out, we did not have a good time with it, because that element of making the lands so rare, so unique didn't happen. Either we got starved by lands or we had too many, that the experience didn't feel balanced, opposed to all the math and ratios that I put into the balancing this idea so that 8 players could draft from this cube at the exact amount of packs that I designed it for. That is exactly where I landed all my math. The minute we tried to adjust to a 1v1 with that, the math just got tossed out the door. It just didn't, it kind of ruined, from, in my opinion, the vibe of the Desert Cube, that race for the lands. What do you think about that, May?
So I think that desert cubes exist in a similar vein as like travel cubes and bar cubes to an extent. Because it's not to say that they like function in a way that other cubes do. They just don't. They are designed with a specialty experience in mind. And when you have lands as a limited resource that you have to draft for, when you have lands that you're having to draft for, you're having to essentially waste a pick that you would have used for a more interesting card on something that you need in order to play the game. And for a lot of people, that can be a fun thing. That can be a fun challenge. It can really push your, let's say, abilities as a drafter. It improves a lot of your ability to draft and read signals and figure out what you need to do in order to get better at Magic. But in a lot of other ways, Desert Cubes can really struggle in that category when they're stuck in that kind of 315... let's say purgatory, right? Where you're trying to play it like a normal cube and suddenly realizing, oh no, this isn't a normal cube at all.
Which, to kind of piggyback off of what you said, Desert Cubes being a specialty cube, another cube where I've experienced this, odd numbers can't really happen for obvious reasons, is my 2-headed giant cube. And I'm not talking about one person playing it. I'm not talking about 2 people playing it. I'm saying that I can play it at 4, but I obviously can't play it at 3. I can't play it at 5. Sure, they could draft, but it's really only works in 4 and 8. And because of that scenario of it only works in 4 and 8, I can't tell you how many times, May, we've all said, yeah, we're going to play the 2-headed giant cube tonight. All right, I'll pack it up. I'll bring it over. And I drive over to Chris's house, and then the 9th player shows up. And as much as I want to sit out, because that's what I told everybody else to do in the 2-headed giant cube, I might as well just go ahead and go back home, because that's going to be 2 hours, because it's with that many players playing almost like an EDH style game, I could go do anything else. I can go mow the lawn or whatever. So it doesn't work very well with these adjusted numbers. I can do 4, I can do 8. I thought about making it so I could do 12, but hell, it's hard enough to get 4. And so landing on these even numbers with humans showing up it can be very frustrating at times to get these. And that's what I kind of wanted to talk about during this episode, because when the person reached out to me that wanted to hear this, I'm like, I've experienced this too. Another thing that can kind of crash and burn, and you just kind of have to accept this, is certain archetypes can just fall apart. It's
just an inevitability. Sometimes you're just not going to see the cards that you need for your archetype. And that is just a consequence that comes with not seeing enough cards. And as much as we can try to increase how many cards that you can see by increasing the draft, there are just some cubes that are so combo or synergy focused, or let's say live the dream engine pieces, right? That if your pod isn't seeing 100% of the cube, they're just not in the pool. And it can lead to a lot of false flags and can lead to bad experiences. And that's where it can fall apart.
And that's where kind of either you set the expectations of your drafters or your other person you're playing with, or you just get another cube. I mean, I'll be straight with you because I will not play again. I won't play the Monopoly in these scenarios. I won't play the two-headed giant. And for a while there, I wasn't playing the artifact cube because the artifact cube kept falling apart. The artifact cube, for example, going back to the top of the episode, struggles specifically in the Winston draft because the mishmash of cards, you can't tell what synergies you're building. I mean, you can't even tell what you're doing, right? Not until it's too late. Whereas in the grid draft for that particular cube, either 1 or 3, it will perform better. Whereas going back to the top episode, Sandwich's cubes, the peasant and pauper, thrives in all these because you don't have to deal with all these specialty cards. While yes, there are cards that work together and there are synergies in a pauper and peasant, it's just not as needed for some of these archetypes to function. You can.
It's definitely the core message of this episode in particular of trying to find the solution that works best for your environment rather than trying to force your environment to function as normal in a problematic scenario.
And instead of giving up and going home, because somebody said that recently, I forget what it was on Discord or whatever, but if we hit seven players and we needed 8, they just pack up their stuff and go home. Or if they just disappointed in the fact they didn't get the whole, the full pod, right? Well, maybe that's happening to you, the listener. And then you can take these various configurations we've talked about until people show up and you can work with it. So May and I, May, do you want to go ahead and just Winston draft with me while we're waiting? Sure. So we start with the cube and we use 90 cards off of, say, my powered 540. Well, then Chris and Sam walk in and then Christian walk in, but May and I are in the middle of a game. Well, you guys can use my cube if you want to, take some more out and go ahead and do a 3-player grid draft until the rest of the people show up. That's fine. Or they go ahead and bust out a 180 cube and just go ahead and start playing however they want. It doesn't matter. But you can do configurations. That way everybody's playing Magic. And then, when the full party shows up, all 8 people get there and you're ready to go. Everybody just says, hey, do you guys want to go ahead and just draft this cube? This is what we do. Absolutely. And everybody just packs it up, cleans up the cubes, and we move on to the main event. We enjoy it.
It's a bit blasphemous to say, but I feel like that it is a good thing to note is that sometimes it's just a good idea to play it like a sealed event, right? Basically set out a certain amount of packs. How many packs was it? 6?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 6 for sealed.
Yeah. So everybody just gets the equivalent of 6 packs and then builds their deck without any drafting involved. And that's like a good way of like jumping directly into the game. And that can be a good way to get around it. As much as cutting out the draft portion can suck, it is a good workaround for when you are looking for something that is good for time, something that is good for the amount of people that you have, because the amount of cards that you're going to be seeing is just flat, and everybody's going to just have what they have out of the pack, and there's this sort of acceptance to randomness that comes with that, right?
Yep. So I will include all of this in the show notes. I hope this has been informative. This is a hard topic to talk about without visuals. So you're going to have to put your imagination hats on here a little bit, but I will include in the show notes some links to this. I know that Lucky Paper Radio has lots of articles. You can find this stuff on different, I just Googled it. You can find things. But this is my favorites to be the Winston, the grid. I do Glimpse sometimes, or Chaos Draft, or whatever you want to call it. I enjoy those, but I do that less frequently. But these are solutions when you start getting these odd numbers. And I hope someone out there is listening going, oh my God, I've got 4 people right now. Then here comes Anthony walk in going, hey, do you guys want a cube? And they're like, oh, what do we do? We have 5 players. Now we know how to adjust for it. 2 of you are going to do a grid draft, and the other 3 are going to do a grid draft of another cube until we get our 6th player that shows up.
You can play more cubes without having to, commander numbers. I beg of you. Please. Thank you all so much for giving our podcast a listen. I appreciate every single one of you being here and giving a listen. And this isn't something that we normally do, but a close friend of mine has recently found herself in the hospital, unable to walk. While she's in the hospital, her bills are not currently able to be paid for. She is trying to get physical therapy so that way she can actually get home. And any donations would be appreciated. We will have the links in the show notes. And if you look up GoFundMe.me 6BFDD426 for those weirdos who want to type that out, it would be very appreciated. Now, Anthony, would you like to take us to the socials?
Absolutely.
All right. First of all, a big thanks to all of our Patreons, to Patrick, to Jeff Stumpo, Nick Lapointe, Chris Fitzgerald, Timber Dragon, Brian Christensen, Keaton Schultz, Lord Justice, Nick Lapointe, Preston, and Sam McKenna. Huge shout out and a big thank you again to all of you for the ongoing support and helping us keep the lights on here at UberCube. If you want to get in on the conversation about Cube at facebook.com/groups/MTGCube, got well over 1,000 members there. A lot of cool conversation going on. If you want to support the show, you can help us out by using our inkedgaming.com/UberCube affiliate link. Get all of your playmats, dice bags, large volume and custom products available. You can find us at Bluesky at ubercubemtgpodcast.bsky.social, as well as Twitter at ubercubemtgpod. If you've got a longer question or comment about the podcast, reach us via email, ubercubemtgpodcast@gmail.com. As always, come hang out with us on the Discord. You can find us at YouTube if you want to, use that to check out our content, Ubercube MTG Podcast 747. And again, a big thanks to all of our patrons at patreon.com/Ubercube. And
if you're interested in becoming a Patreon, let's start out with our good friend Sarah McLaughlin. In the arms of the Patreons.
Well, again, this is something that we talked about a little bit, and what my plan is to figure out a way where we can do some drafts on Draftmancer and then do some playing on Magic Online. It would probably require us to buy the cards from one of the cubes.
I'm going to do Arena Cube. I'm doing the Arena Cube.
You're doing the
chromatic, yeah.
You know what? There's also rental services that are available for Magic Online if you want to just
card loaner.
Yeah, you can rent cards on Magic Online. It's not super expensive.
We should do the Fae Cube.
We should do all of the cubes. I think it would be fun. We should do the Fae. We should do the Horror. We should do the Femme. We should do as many as we can. I think it'd be a great way to be able to interact with our Patreons as well as our listeners, but also just to get some more cube, content out there on the YouTubes.
Can you make Modo not suck, dude?
Modo is an old client that unfortunately or fortunately has to support a very, very intricate and complicated game that is Magic the Gathering. And I know the interface is kind of old, and if you're someone out there that doesn't like it because you did what Anthony did and you cast a walking ballista for 0 mana, you know what? It's one of those that once you get used to it, you'll get good with it, Anthony. I have faith in you. And there's possibilities there for sure.
Happy cubing.
Walking ballista for 0.